Welcome to the Identity Shift podcast, where we explore the real journey of becoming who you're meant to be. I'm Eileen Rouse, identity transformation coach, intuitive mentor, and creator of the 6 Divine Soul Shifts framework. For nearly 20 years, I've guided hundreds of women through emotional healing, spiritual awakening, and identity transformation. If you're a spiritually aware woman, navigating a season of change, questioning old roles, reclaiming your voice, or stepping into a version of yourself that feels more aligned, authentic, and powerful, then you're in the right place. Each week, we'll explore the mindset shifts, emotional breakthroughs, intuitive wisdom, and practical tools that help you stop people pleasing, trust yourself deeply, set healthy boundaries, and step into the leadership, purpose, and life you're here to create. So take a deep breath, settle in, and let's navigate this identity shift together. Welcome to the very first episode of the Identity Shift podcast. I'm so grateful to be here. I know it has been a very long time since I've actually put out an episode. So it is really great to be back, and I'm really excited about all of the amazing content that I have lined up for you all. If you've listened to my previous podcast, I want to thank you for joining me on this new chapter. And if this is your first time finding me, welcome. My name is Eileen Rouse. I'm an identity transformation coach, an intuitive mentor, and for nearly 20 years, I've guided hundreds of women through deep emotional identity transformation. This podcast was born from my own journey of discovering that the hardest part of transformation isn't changing your life. It's actually changing the identity you've built your life around. Because there comes a moment for many of us when we look around and we realize the life we've created no longer feels like home. Not because it's bad, not because we've failed, but because we've become someone different. So today, I want to share my story. Not because it's unique, but because I have a feeling that parts of it may actually sound a lot like yours, or maybe some of you might have actually experienced it. So for starters, for years, I worked in the corporate world as an executive assistant. I supported visionary CEOs, managed projects, solved problems, and became known as the person who could make almost anything happen. I want to point out that I had a lot of crazy skills that many people valued. And so this is probably one of the reasons why I was so good at what I did, because I could get things done, like literally get things done. I was a person that if someone needed help, they came to me. If there was a crisis going on, I handled it. If something needed to get done, people knew that they could honestly count on me. And I loved that. To be fair, I truly loved it. I took pride in being dependable, in being capable. And I want to say that in the beginning, my identity became wrapped up in being the person everyone could rely on. From the outside looking in, my life looked like it was successful, that I had it all. I mean, I remember having conversations with family members when I would, talk about my days at work and the things that I'd accomplished. And they were all just in awe of how successful I was and everything that I'd accomplished. I can honestly say that the one thing I did have was I had stability, I had a career, I had respect, and I had purpose. I want to make that very clear. When I first started in my corporate career, it was all about purpose. And I felt at that time that my purpose was to be needed, was to be the one that everyone relied on. But there was also another story that was unfolding quietly beneath the surface, one that very few people saw. And I often call that the quiet voice that was often in the background that slowly started peeking its head in my life. And there were moments that I tried really hard to silence that voice. While I was building my corporate career, I was also spending nearly 20 years of that time studying about intuition, about spirituality, emotional healing, and transformation. I've always known there was something more to life than what I was currently experiencing. I always felt deeply connected to helping people heal and remember who they truly were, including myself. At first, those two worlds coexisted. I was doing my corporate thing during the day. And then at night or on the weekends or any free spare time I had, I was coaching, I was doing intuitive work, and I was doing spiritual development as much as I could possibly do. But over time, something in me shifted. That quiet voice inside me that was rearing its head to me every so often got louder and louder and louder to the point that I could no longer ignore it. It wasn't saying quit your job. It wasn't saying you need to start over. It was just simply asking me one question. What if there's more to life than this? And it was that one question that really started making me question so many things. So now I want to ask you, have you ever felt that? Have you ever felt like there in your day or in anything that you're doing, that you're looking at what you're doing or what you're currently experiencing, and you ask yourself, is there more to life than this? So, if that has happened to you, I want you to know that nothing is necessarily wrong, but something inside you keeps whispering. And if it's whispering, then it's obviously trying to get your attention. It's wanting you to pay attention to it. It's wanting you to listen because there is more. There is so much more. So the truth is, I had become incredibly good at taking care of everyone else. I was good at taking care of my family, my coworkers, my friends, you name it. I was the one that they called on. I need help, right? I was the fixer. I was the helper. I was the responsible one. I was the one that said yes far more often than I should have. I took on more than anyone expected me to. And like so many women, I convinced myself I was just being kind. And I think we all sort of fall into that role at some point in our life where, we have this narrative or this script that runs in the background that tells us you just have to be nice. You have to help as many people as you possibly can. But I want you to know that looking back now, I wasn't simply being kind. I feel that a part of me had learned to tie my worth into being needed. And that ultimately came from my childhood. If I didn't feel that I was needed, then I felt there was no purpose or intention to me being in life or a part of anyone's life. So, having learned that and having tied my worth to being needed, eventually my body began speaking a language my mind wasn't willing to hear. So, one day after work, as I was rushing out of the office, handling a project along the many other multitude of projects that I was handling at that time, I felt an intense pain shoot through my lower abdomen and into my back. Now, I want to kind of paint a little bit of a picture for you here because, again, tying my worth into being needed was also me being willing to sacrifice myself for getting things done, especially in my corporate role. And so at this time, there was a particular project, a departmental move that I was in charge of. And I was the type of person that whenever I was handling something of great importance for my role, for my job, I would withhold vacation from myself. I would avoid calling in. I would make sure that I would bend over backwards. I would readjust my day, anything to make sure that everything was perfect and that everything flowed beautifully. But this one time, I remember being so caught up in the tasks and in the project that needed to get done that I was completely and utterly oblivious to the signs and the signals that my body was sending me. So on this particular day, when I was on my way home and I felt that deep shooting pain, I knew almost instantly that something was wrong. I remember, in fact, having that deep, intense pain on my way home that I remember sending a message to my wife and telling her that I thought something was wrong and that we might potentially need to go to the hospital. Eventually, when I got to the park and ride where my wife picked me up and I got in the car, I remember her looking at me and being horrified because she could tell that something was wrong. She told me that I looked really ashen and she could tell that I was in a lot of pain. And she said, "We're going to the emergency room." Now, mind you, I remember sitting in that seat next to her, telling her that I didn't want to go to the ER because I had so much work and a deadline that I needed to meet. And the thought of me going to the emergency room meant that I, number one, didn't know how long it was going to take me to get seen. Number two, they would probably find something wrong with me and I would ultimately have to stay, which would mean that I would have to put all of my deadlines on hold. And that was just unacceptable for me. And I'm going to tell you that the pain was so bad that it eventually led me to the hospital. Now, looking back, I realized that moment, you know, it wasn't random. My body had been whispering for a very long time. It had been trying to communicate with me to slow down, to pay attention, to focus, and to really listen to what it was trying to tell me. I just wasn't listening. And I want you to kind of put yourself in that position at this moment. How many of you wait until your body forces you to slow down? How many of you believe that if you just keep pushing, everything will somehow work itself out? Sometimes our greatest wake up call isn't emotional, sometimes it's physical. And I will honestly tell you that that one experience really sort of put me into, it catapulted me. Let me just say that. It catapulted me into really truly understanding what was important and what was not. Because when I got to the emergency room and they got me into a gown and into a room and told me they needed to do scans and they took me in and I remember very clearly them asking me, number one, uh, some very important questions that were very much related to the word cancer. And rest assured, I did not have cancer, but there were some things about the testing that just didn't feel right to them, and rightfully so. And so the more testing that they did, the more scans that they did, come to find out, I had to have emergency surgery. And it was not something that I was expecting. And that moment of being forced, that's what I'm going to say. I was forced to slow down and to evaluate what was important to me and what could wait. So in that moment, everything changed. And I want to tell you that it changed for the better. It actually completely changed the direction of my life. And it really catapulted me into a place where I really started to evaluate things at a much deeper, more intuitive level. Now, I want to fast forward very quickly to when I left my corporate job in 2020 in the middle of the pandemic, when everybody thought I was crazy and losing my mind. And going through that experience, I was every day living my life, really evaluating how I was responding and what I was doing. But it wasn't until I started working for another company that I was working for part-time. It wasn't a full-time position. It was more of a part-time position, and I was helping a startup company. I was more of an executive assistant. I worked primarily with the CEO of the company, and it was more along the lines of assisting the CEO with personal things, but then also operations and how things flowed within the office. And I did not work in this position very long. Now, mind you, I was already in a very thriving coaching business from home, and I wanted something a little bit more challenging. And so I was doing this as a way for me to moonlight, I guess would be the right word, to moonlight my skills and my abilities with another sort of corporate position. But then this is when things really changed in my life, and when the direction of my life really catapulted into identity work. My corporate position that I was now in was eliminated. I remember getting the phone call from my then CEO and her telling me that she wanted to have a conversation with me. Now, mind you, I wasn't expecting this. This was a position that I absolutely loved. It was stressful at times. It demanded a lot of me and from me, but I had very good boundaries in this role. And I knew exactly what was transpiring and what I could tolerate and what I would not tolerate. And so I was really okay. But I will tell you that by the time this conversation actually happened, I was kind of already thinking about moving on because I could already tell that I had completely shifted out of that person, of that reality, of that identity. And so when my CEO got me on the phone, she basically asked how my day was. And then I remember her telling me, you have been a great asset to the team. You have been tremendously helpful to not only me and to the organization, but I need to tell you that we are eliminating your position effective today. I clearly remember hearing those words. And I want to tell you that there was a part of me that was shocked. And I was shocked for maybe reasons I didn't quite really understand. But I will tell you that I think the primary reason why I was shocked was because I'd never been let go from a position before. Let me say that clearly. I had never been fired I've never been laid off from a position ever in my entire career. The one job that I had that I got when I was like 19 years old until the day that I quit, that I retired from in 2020 was the only experience I'd ever had. So part of me felt shocked. And then there was another part of me that felt really scared. And if I'm being completely honest, there was another part of me that felt a massive, giant feeling of relief. And I don't think it was because I wanted to lose my job, but I think it was because deep down, I knew that I had already outgrown that version of myself. And I think the reason why the fear came up, why I was so scared, number one, is because I'd never been let go from a position before. I'd never been fired. I'd never been laid off. So that was a new experience for me. And I was already hardwired for meeting everybody's expectations. And I'd worked really hard when I left my corporate job in 2020 for that. But I think that having her tell me that she had eliminated my position was probably like the greatest news I'd ever heard. Like, I will tell you, just so that you can get an idea of what I'm talking about, like, she told me and I listened to what she said. I told her, okay. I didn't cry. I didn't gasp. I just told her that it was a great experience, that I enjoyed working for her. And she told me that if I ever needed, a letter of recommendation, she would be more than willing to offer me one. And that was it. That was the end of the conversation. And then I remember picking up my cell phone. I remember calling my wife and telling her. And then she was like, "Are you okay?" And I just remember laughing and telling her, "I think I'm fine. I think I'm okay." But I will tell you that 3 days later, I cried. I think all of the pent-up fear, the shock, the surprise of it happening finally came forward. And I think that I cried not because I was sad because I'd lost the position or because I no longer had that position. I cried because I was grieving the version of myself that I had completely outgrown, because I now knew that I was a completely different person. And I think I was also grieving the fact that my life had removed a form of a safety net that I had relied on. That experience alone forced me to ask one of the hardest questions I've ever had to face. And that question was, who am I? I don't think I'd ever really truly asked myself that question again at a different level. I asked myself that question when I was in my first corporate job, in my first corporate role that I I had completely outgrown, that I stayed way longer than I should have. I asked that of myself because I knew that I had at that point shifted into a new identity. But then this time I had already created a new identity that was learning from this CEO who had this startup business, and being the executive assistant to her and really seeing how things really work was valuable. It was information that was so helpful for me in my own growth as a CEO. But being eliminated and grieving the version of myself that I had outgrown, and then really asking myself, who am I when the title is gone? That was a very big question. And then the next question that came up for me was, who am I when the job disappears? Who am I when the identity that I've spent years building no longer exists? All of those questions not only rolled around in my mind, but I had to really dig deep and journal about. I had to really answer those questions and really figure it out for myself. because I knew that this was the moment where my identity collapsed. See, most people think that transformation begins when you discover your purpose. I don't. I can tell you that transformation begins when the identity that you've been living can no longer carry you into your future. That is an identity collapse. It's the space between who you've been and who you're becoming. And let me tell you, it's uncomfortable. It's uncertain. It's messy. But it's also sacred because it's where the old version of you begins to loosen its grip. And the woman that you're becoming finally has room to emerge. Now, maybe that's where you are today. Maybe you're questioning your life, your career, your relationships, your purpose. Maybe you don't recognize yourself anymore. I can tell you the number of times that I stood in front of a mirror and just looked at myself and wondered, who am I? If that's you, I really want you to lean in and I want you to hear this. You are not falling apart. So if you're telling yourself that, stop, because you're not. You are becoming. You are becoming the version of you that is creating your future in this very moment. You are becoming a higher version, an aspect of who you once were. And my own experience is the reason why I created this podcast. It's not so that I could give you all of the answers, but it's to help you understand what you're experiencing because I'm seeing it all over the place. I'm seeing it in all of the clients that are showing up, who are taking my quiz and who are showing up in my coaching sessions, who are signing up for free consults with me. I see it everywhere. And I do this to help you understand what you're experiencing. And also so that you know that when you understand what's happening, you'll stop fighting what's happening. So over the coming weeks, we're going to have honest conversations about identity. We're going to talk about many things, including people pleasing, boundaries, leadership, visibility, self-trust, purpose, emotional healing, spiritual awakening, business, and what it truly means to become the woman you're here to be. Now, I want to make one thing very clear. This is not about creating a new identity. It's about releasing the one that no longer fits. Because let me tell you, if you're experiencing this already, then you've already shifted into a new identity. You just don't know how to navigate it. So, before we finish today, I want to leave you with a very simple question. And you can answer this question. You can drop it in the comments if you'd like, or you can journal the answer to this question. But here's your question. Where in your life have you outgrown the version of yourself that you've been holding on to? I want you to not rush to answer this question. I want you to sit with it for a minute. I want you to just rummage that question around in your mind. Really sit with it. Contemplate on it. Because awareness is always the first step towards transformation. And I think that once you hear the answer, you'll truly understand what your next step is. So, my friends, if today's episode resonated with you, I'd love to invite you to take my free quiz What identity shift are you navigating right now? It will help you discover where you are in your own journey and what your next step might be. You'll find the link in the show notes. And if you know another woman who's quietly wondering why the life she's built no longer feels like it fits, I want you to please share this episode with her. She may need to hear that she's not broken. She may need to hear that she's becoming. So I want to thank you so much for spending this time with me today. Until next time, trust yourself, honor your journey, and remember, transformation is not about becoming someone else. It's about coming home to who you've always been. Until next time, namaste. Thank you for spending this time with me today. If this episode resonated with you, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with someone who may be navigating an identity shift of their own. And if you're wondering what phase of transformation you're currently moving through, take my free quiz. What identity shift are you navigating right now? The link is in the show notes. Remember, transformation isn't about becoming someone new. It's about remembering who you've always been beneath the expectations, conditioning, and roles you've outgrown. Until next time, trust yourself, honor your journey, and keep becoming the woman you're meant to be.